Hi, I'm Sarah. This is my sister Rebecca, and we're back again. We just did a video about our top 5 favorite books, and it got us thinking about how our favorite books are actually different from books we recommend to other people. I've been getting a lot of people asking me for book recommendations, and it got me thinking about how it's different. You know, the books that I like to read for me, and I know my taste, and I know maybe they're not the best books, but they're what I love, how that's different from books that I actually recommend to other people. It's a different list. For me anyway. How about for you?
If I really like a book, a lot of times that's the book I recommend. If I like it, you'll like it. There's like older people, like I'll do a different book. Like a middle class mom probably isn't going to be into World War Z.
No, I definitely have there's different people that I recommend different books to. I do read a lot of chick lit. I know people don't like that term, but I definitely read a lot of books that are written by women for women. So if a man asks me for recommendation, I generally don't recommend one of those. For my top book that I like to recommend to men is Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. Krakauer? We really need to start looking up how to pronounce these names. And this is a memoir about the 1995 disaster on Mount Everest that he happened to be there and be a part of. He's a writer. He was writing an article for a sports adventure magazine about hiking Everest, and he happened to be there when a big storm hit and several people lost their lives. And this is a really compelling book. I will also recommend this book to women. Generally anyone that's outdoorsy or they're looking for good nonfiction, I like to recommend this one. It's just a good book. I really like it. It's one of those books that when I first read it, I would end up on these Wikipedia wormholes, you know? They talk about how when you're hiking Mount Everest, there's actual bodies that are used as landmarks.
Which is still true today.
It is. Some of them they've kind of pushed off to the side. But if you die on Mount Everest,
it's hard to take down.
There's nothing they can do. There's famous ones that are basically landmarks. I know one of them's called Green Boots or something.
Yeah, he's the one that's on the very top.
I don't think he's at the top.
He's pretty close to the top.
He's a common landmark, you know, oh, you hit Green Boots and then you turn that type of thing. And when I was first reading this and I found out about it, I was like, what? So then I started looking up all these bodies that are well known and then reading. It's a wormhole for sure. And I feel like the book is kind of full of them. You could go down that wormhole. You could go down things about what happens to people when they start hallucinating from the hypoxic brain injury, from not getting enough oxygen. There's so many different facets to this book, and there's so many different ways to look at what happened that it's a good book for anyone. But it tends to be what I recommend when men ask me for recommendation because it's written by a man, has a male protagonist, which just...
And I feel like all men think they can climb Mount Everest.
I agree.
And it's good to tell them they can't.
And I think Jon Krakauer agrees. There's something he says in the intro that kind of says, don't do this. If you think you can do it, don't do it.
And he did do it. He succeeded. The book is kind of about the problem of the idea of reaching the top of Everest doesn't fit the experience. You're basically miserable the entire time just to say you did it.
I actually saw the movie first, and I thought it helped me when I was reading the book. And I'd like to recommend people, especially if they're not big readers, sometimes it's helpful if there's a movie or a TV show that goes along with the book. I think it's one you can read even if you're not a reader. And I do think it appeals to both genders, but it's what always comes to mind whenever men, especially outdoorsy men. It's a fun book to recommend to somebody too, because after they read it, then you can discuss it.
Yeah. And I mean, they teach it in a lot of college classes, and high school seniors read it too. So
oh, really?
It makes you seem intellectual.
Yeah. People ask me for nonfiction a lot too, and that's a good one, because some people, if they're not big readers even, they want to feel like they're learning.
Yeah.
And it's a good one. There's a lot of different reasons.
I mean, I feel like in a lot of job interviews, they're like, what's the last book you read when you tell them you like to read? And that one's not embarrassing to say.
Yeah, it's always good to have a nonfiction in your back pocket for that question.
Yeah.
Just
not embarrassing.
You never want to be stuck in that job interview and be like, 50 Shades of... No.
When I said I like to read.
What do you recommend if men ask you for a recommendation? Is it different?
I guess it depends on the man. I have one that's fiction, which is World War Z, which I talked about in the last video. A lot of men are more interested in short stories. You could take it piece by piece. I feel some people who aren't big readers, that appeals to them. I could read the first, and then I could come back whenever I wanted to read the second part of it. And also I don't know, you say to a man, zombies and geopolitical thriller, and they're like, yes, of course, that's like speaks to me. Like, those are all the things I love. Like, I've definitely recommended it to paramours, if you will. I think a lot of people have a misconception of it. They're like, oh, I saw the movie with Brad Pitt.
Oh,
I feel like it's nothing like the book.
If you're recommending that book, or when I've recommended it, I've always been, it's nothing like the movie. And then the other thing I always tell people about that book is that it does start off a little slow. Realistically so. Like, I do think it's real. And I think that after a coronavirus, we all might be a little more interested in how it kind of slowly starts off and then explodes.
It's also like, the second time you read it, especially when you reread the first part of it, you're like, oh, this was kind of slow the first time I read it. But then the second time, you're like, you can feel like the tension mounting slowly in a way that actually is like, you get kind of freaked out. It's a little scary sometimes, but you know, a lot of men like horror more than.
It's also written by a man.
Yeah, it's written by a man too.
Take it what you will. I don't read a lot of books by male authors. I tend to prefer by female authors with female main characters. And I assume men are the same way, which is why when I'm recommending a book to a man, I tend to pick one by a male author. One that I tend to recommend if someone asks me for nonfiction is Radium Girls. It's about women that accidentally became poisoned with radium while at work, young women. And this is another one, I think it's got a lot of different angles you can look at it from. It's worker safety is a big center point to it. There's the medical angle of what the radium actually did to them and how it affected them all differently and kind of insidiously at first. Like, it would start off very slow and then they would die pretty rapidly sometimes, or sometimes slowly. Some of them would be permanently disfigured but managed to live. Like, a lot of different angles there. They tried to fight back once they realized what was happening to them and what was causing it. They tried to fight back against their employers and the legal battle and the long-term effects on worker safety and that type of stuff. So it's got a lot of important historical angles, but then also a lot of really interesting kind of medical science type angle. And I think it's a page turner. Like, when you read it, you get invested very easily. So I think it's a good nonfiction. I think it's a good nonfiction for people that maybe don't always read nonfiction.
I feel like it's an important book because one of the things that in history is like, there's always like, here's what was happening in the world, and then there's like a little paragraph, and here's what women were doing. But it's like, this is how women's stories actually are a part of history, not just like a subset paragraph. Like, this is how women are a part of the workforce. This is how women are part of like workers' rights narrative.
What was your nonfiction pick?
I picked Educated. Well, no, I have two nonfiction on here. So I guess I'll start with Educated. Educated is a book about a woman who was raised by parents who were like religious, somewhat religious fanatics, but religion didn't actually play a large part into the book. But it's more about how her parents like lived a kind of like an alternative lifestyle where they took her and all of her siblings like away from basically the outside world, and how that isolation affected her education, like all of her education, until college was self-directed.
She didn't learn how to read till she was, I forget the age.
She was like a case of she was bright enough that the fact that her parents didn't really teach her didn't hurt her like it might someone else, and she was interested in very like one particular subject that she really got into. And she had a sibling that had kind of made a lot of progress before her that helped her realize what she needed to do to go to college, and then she eventually ends up at Harvard.
I agree that I think the isolation aspect is more important than like the religious aspect. They're isolated from the education system. They're isolated from the medical system. That's kind of
a big part of it.
That is a big part of it. Yeah, they don't really go to
doctors unless it's like you're dead.
The main focus was on her education, and it was very interesting. Her siblings, they kind of end up split down the middle, where half of them end up in with PhDs, and the other half end up not finishing high school. But I agree, that's I read that one. I liked that one.
A lot of people read it. It's very good. It's very inspiring.
It is, yeah.
She deals with a lot and kind of comes out the other side educated.
And then your other one, I have not read that one.
This is one I would recommend to a subset of people I call educated men. who are testing you on your interest level in the world as you share pasta. But also, like, maybe they were actually looking for book recommendations. But men who like to read, who are educated, who are asking you if you have a book recommendation. Probably not Republicans, but you never know. It's called All the Shahs Men, and it's kind of the story of after World War II of what happens in Iran, because Iran, after World War II, kind of had a period of moving towards like a more progressive government. So,
men like World War II, don't they?
Yeah, men really like World War II.
I'm not gonna lie, you're not exactly selling me on that one. To
That's
be fair, that doesn't sound like my type of book.
That's why I said it's like educated men. It's a very like, that's who I would recommend that to. You know, I date a lot of communists. What am I saying? All the Shahs Men really appeal to them. So All the Shahs Men is a story about how after World War II, the United States fought communism by fucking up everywhere else. Fucked up the Middle East, fucked up South America. But is there communism? Success. If you're looking to understand the world as it is today, it's one of the books that would probably be like, why are things the way they are? Like, why is there such a relationship between the United States and Iran? There's a book that'll kind of give you an idea.
I don't think that would be one for someone that's like, I haven't read a book since high school. What do you recommend?
No, I wouldn't start there.
All right, so I've actually got a few that I kind of save for that recommendation. So my next 3 books that I have are all kind of like easy to get into page turners that someone that hasn't read a book in a while can just pick up and like beach reads, you know, that type of thing. So my first one is one that's been really making the rounds, like BookTube, Bookstagram, that type of thing. It's called The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I like to recommend it if someone's looking for a good, easy to read historical fiction. It's about a woman who was a movie star back in the 40s, 50s, something like that. It starts out in present day, and she picks a young reporter that she wants to kind of tell her kind of scandalous life story to, and it's just very interesting. She had 7 husbands, you know, she's kind of like one of the old Hollywood glamour movie stars, and we get to see everything from her perspective and learn about her life and how she ended up where she did. There's some fun twists. It's just a good readable book. I think a lot of people do like it. It's been very popular, and I think it's be a good book for someone who maybe wants something kind of historical, but maybe hasn't read a book in a while and just wants to get back into it. And I read a lot, and I liked it. I thought it was fun. I think I read it in like 2 days because it's a page turner. You like it. My next one, kind of similar, just a fun beach read, is Big Little Lies. This one they recently made into an HBO series. I haven't watched the series actually.
It's like darker than the book. Like the TV show's like gritty and like every character has a past. But in the book it's not that cool. It's, I don't know, more relatable. I don't know.
It's a good kind of whodunit. I actually think I've read all of her books, and I've liked all of them. Big Little Lies or The Husband's Secret are my favorite.
I like What Alice Forgot.
I like that one a lot too.
No, I like The Hypnotists.
Really?
Yeah, like that one was really good because like it's about a woman stalker, which I was like, how does a woman become a stalker? And I was like, okay, this checks out. It was his fault. What's the opposite of misogyny? Only women will watch this anyways.
Yeah. I liked that one. My favorites are The Husband's Secret and Big Little Lies, but I think if I'm looking for one to recommend, I usually go with Big Little Lies because I feel like The Husband's Secret's a little darker, a little heavier, and I feel like if someone's just looking for kind of something just fun to read, I think Big Little Lies, that's the one I tend to recommend more.
It lives up to the hype.
It does, yeah. It's very readable, it's fun. Take it on vacation with you, read it on the beach, it's perfect for that.
My last book that I would recommend to people, this one would be geared towards, I guess, maybe educated older women type of. I feel like The Handmaid's Tale is like a classic that is more accessible, especially considering the TV show's out, and I think the TV show is great. But this is one where I would say read the book first before the TV show. It's a very good book, and I think one of the things one of my friends said about this book is that as you're reading it, you're like, this is an important book, like I should be reading this, which I think makes it in some ways more enjoyable. You're like, I want to continue reading it because it says something.
I think it's a good classic book, and that it's short.
It is. It's not super long.
It's readable. The book is very restrained. You are seeing this new world from a very limited point of view. When I first read it, I felt betrayed by it. Because I was like, oh my god, it didn't tell me anything. I don't know anything about this world or this woman or what happened to her. I don't even know her real name. But then later down the line, I was like, oh my god, that's what's so brilliant about it.
Going to that, there's a sequel. I like the sequel. It's definitely different, and I think the sequel is kind of inspired in some ways by the show, but I did feel it gave some interesting details that I appreciated as a reader.
By expanding on the story, I felt it like took away from the power of the first book. I 100% respect Margaret Atwood for writing the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, because I 100% would have done it too to get that coin.
I don't know, it's The Handmaid's Tale is obviously the literary classic. The sequel is like, let's venture into this world a little bit more.
I think I recommended The Handmaid's Tale more before the TV show came out. Like now I'm almost just like, well, I'll watch the TV show because it's more...
The TV show's so good.
It's very good. And it's
so good.
More accessible than the book.
I'm not a Margaret Atwood, like, diehard fan. Like, she hit one note for me, and I appreciate that.
I'm with you there. I read another book of hers, The Robber Bride, back in college, and I didn't care for that one. Alright, so those are our top recommendations. I hope you guys appreciated this video. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.